The wind is coming down off the ridge tonight, and I can hear it working through the pines like something with a grudge. My fire's holding steady, and there's a pot of snow melting slow at the edge of the coals. I've got my back to a deadfall and my boots near the flame, and I'm thinking about a thing that most folks would laugh at if I said it out loud in town. So I'll say it out here where only you can hear me. The thing that killed more mountain men than any grizzly ever thought about is a piece of dry wood. That's it, a stick of firewood you'd walk right past. Something free, something lying all around a man in the deep timber. Something so plain and ordinary that nobody ever thinks to fear it. And it has put more good, hard men into shallow, frozen graves than every bear and cougar and wolf that ever walked this country put together. I know how that sounds. A bear is 900 pounds of teeth and claws and bad intentions. A piece of firewood is just a piece of firewood. But stay with me by this fire a while, because once you understand what I'm about to tell you, you will never gather wood the same way again. And more than that, you'll understand a thing about how men die out here that almost nobody living still knows. Let me tell you who I am first, so you don't think I'm just spinning you a story to pass a cold night. I've run trap lines in country where the nearest stove was 3 days' walk over a pass that closed with the first hard snow. I've spent whole winters where the only heat I had was the heat I made with my own 2 hands, and where a bad fire wasn't a discomfort, it was a death sentence with a slow fuse on it. The men who taught me the old ways didn't learn them from any book or any class. They learned them the way this knowledge has always been learned, which is by losing people to the lack of it. Every rule they hammered into me had a name attached to it once. A partner, a brother, a man they found in the spring when the drifts pulled back. And the rule about firewood, the rule I'm going to give you tonight, is the one they were most solemn about of all, because it's the one that dressed itself up as the least dangerous thing in the woods. Here's the paradox I want you to hold on to, and I'm not going to explain it yet. I'm going to plant it in your mind like a seed and let it sit there through everything else I say, because when I finally crack it open for you, it'll land 10 times harder for the waiting. Here it is. A warm man freezes to death. That's the riddle. A man with a good fire going, a man who is at that very moment warm, sweating even. That is the man the cold takes. Not the shivering man, not the man with no fire, the warm one. Turn that over in the back of your head while I build up to it, because it's the whole spine of this thing. And if I just told you flat out, you wouldn't believe me anyway. A warm man freezes to death. Hold it. Now let me tell you why the firewood is the killer. And it comes down to a lie that firewood tells you. The same kind of lie the lean rabbit tells a starving man. Firewood tells you that heat is heat, that a fire is a fire, that if you're warm right now, you'll be warm later, and that the whole problem of a winter night is simply a matter of having enough wood to burn. And every part of that is wrong in a way that will kill you. Picture the man this catches. He's not a fool. That's the first thing you have to understand. Because we always want to believe the dead were careless, and we'd have done better. He's not careless. He's a capable man, maybe a good woodsman even, and he's out in hard cold, and evening's coming down. He finds himself a spot, and he does the natural thing. The thing that feels exactly like good sense. He gathers wood. And here's where the woods reach out and set the trap. Because the wood that's easiest to gather is the wood lying on the ground. The fallen limbs, the deadfall. The branches a man can snap up by the armful in 20 minutes without ever swinging an axe. Free fuel, as much as he can carry, and he carries plenty. He builds himself a roaring fire off of it, a real blaze, and he sits down in front of it feeling like a king, feeling warm, feeling safe. And that fire, that big, beautiful, easy fire, is going to be the death of him. Because it's built on the wrong wood, and it's built the wrong way, and it's built with the wrong idea of what a fire is even for. He thinks a fire is for being warm, and that's the lie that kills him. Sit with this next part close, because it's the piece almost nobody understands anymore. And it's where the whole thing turns. That downed wood, the stuff lying on the forest floor, soaking up snowmelt and ground damp all season, that wood is wet clean through no matter how dry it looks on the outside. And wet wood does a cruel thing. It burns fast and hot and bright when you first get it going because the fire's driving the water out of it in a rush, and it throws a big showy flame that a man warms his hands at and trusts with his life. But it burns out just as fast. It leaves no coal bed. It leaves nothing but a scatter of black, wet ends and gray ash. And it does this right about the deepest, coldest part of the night, the hours past midnight when the temperature bottoms out and a man's own body is at its lowest ebb. So the fire that felt like a king's fire at dusk is a handful of dying embers at 3 in the morning, and the man who built it is asleep because he's warm, because he trusted it. And that's the setup. But the wood is only half of it. The other half lives inside the man himself, and it's darker and stranger than most people would ever guess. Because here's the thing they don't teach you. The warmth of that big early fire does something to a man that betrays him from the inside. When you're good and warm, your body opens itself up. The blood comes rushing out to the skin, out to the hands and the face and the feet. All that warmth spreading to the surface where you can feel it. It feels wonderful. It feels like safety itself. But every bit of that warmth at the surface is warmth leaving the core, radiating off into the night air. A cold man's body is smart. It pulls the blood in tight to the heart and the lungs and the brain, and lets the hands and feet go cold on purpose. Because it's protecting the fire in the furnace, the deep heat that keeps a man alive. A warm man's body throws the doors and windows open, and so the man in front of that dying fire, sweating even in his coat because he built it too big and sat too close, has bled his deep heat out to his skin and given it away to the sky. And when that fire fails in the black cold hours, he has nothing banked, no reserve. He spent it all feeling comfortable. Now hold that riddle up again. A warm man freezes to death. You're starting to see the shape of it now, aren't you? But I haven't given you the whole of it. Keep holding it. There's more underneath. Let me tell you who knew this and who didn't. Because it's the same old sorrowful pattern I've seen in every one of these lessons, and it never stops being true. The native peoples of the cold country, the ones who'd wintered on this land for 1,000 years and more, they didn't die of this the way the newcomers did. And it wasn't because they were tougher, though they were tough. It was because they understood what a fire was actually for, and they understood it so deep in their bones that they'd never have put it into the kind of words I'm using now. They built small fires. Small, mean, careful fires. And they built them of the right wood. And they built shelters that caught and held and threw back the heat so that the fire didn't have to fight the whole open night by itself. They knew a fire is not for warming your body. A fire is for warming your shelter, and the shelter warms your body. That's a different thing entirely, and the difference is a man's life. The ones who died were the trappers and the prospectors and the lone travelers who came out from the settled places, and they did the thing that people always do, which is they copied the surface and they skipped the knowing. They saw the fire and they built a fire. They didn't see the shelter behind the fire, the wood behind the flame, the whole quiet system of a man managing his own heat like a careful thing to be spent slow. They saw a man being warm, and they thought being warm was the whole of it. And being warm was the trap. So they built their big roaring fires against the open dark, and they sweated, and they slept, and a good number of them never woke. And when they were found, they were often found with wood still stacked beside them, unburned, which is its own kind of terrible thing to think about. Wood still there, the means of life right at hand, and the man gone cold in his blankets 3 feet from it, because he'd never understood that the wood wasn't the point, and the fire wasn't the point, and even the warmth wasn't the point. The point was to never once, all night long, let his deep heat drop. And that is a thing a big fire cannot do for you, and will in fact do the opposite of. Now, before I hand you the fix, because there is a fix, and it's free, and it's the part nearly everybody gets exactly backward, I need you to understand something about how the cold actually kills. Because if you don't understand the enemy, you can't understand why the fix works. Cold doesn't kill you all at once. Most times. It kills you the way water wears down a stone, a little at a time. And it kills you through your own confidence, more than through any single mistake. The dangerous cold is rarely the deep howling -40 that everybody fears and prepares for. The deep, terrible cold, folks respect it, and respect keeps them alive. The cold that kills is the moderate cold, the wet cold, the 28 degrees and drizzling cold. The cold a man doesn't take seriously because it doesn't feel like death. It just feels like an unpleasant evening. And so he doesn't build the shelter he'd build if it were 40 below. He doesn't manage himself. He thinks he can just tough it out by a fire. And that moderate, careless night is the one that finds him. So here's the fix, and I'll hand it to you in layers the way it was handed to me. Because to dump it all at once would strip it of its weight, and you'd forget it by morning. The first layer turns your whole priority around, the same way you have to turn a man's head around about food. You are not trying to build a big fire. You are trying to build a lasting fire in a warm space. Stop thinking about flame and start thinking about heat that stays. The single most dangerous instinct a cold man has is to build his fire bigger. Every part of you, when you're cold and scared, wants a bigger blaze, more light, more roar, more flame to push back the dark. And that big blaze is exactly what burns your fuel to nothing by midnight and bleeds your body heat out to the surface where the night can steal it. A small, steady fire, built right, tended right, will carry you through a night that a great roaring one will let you die in. Small and lasting beats big and brief every single time. And if there's one thing I could burn into you tonight, it's that. The fire you want is one you could almost mistake for too little. That's the fire that keeps men alive. The second layer is the part modern people throw away without even knowing they're throwing away their lives. It's the standing dead wood, and the fat pine, the pitchwood, the heart of the old stumps, the stuff nobody gathers because it's harder to get than the easy, damp branches lying about. Standing dead wood. Wood that died but never fell. Wood that's been drying in the wind up off the wet ground for a year, or 2, or 10. That is the wood that burns slow and clean and lays down a deep bed of coals. And the fat lighter, the resin-soaked heart of a pine that died and rotted away everywhere but the pitchy core. That stuff is a gift from the old forest, and it lights when everything else is soaked, and it burns like it's got a grudge against the cold. The man who spends his last hour of daylight cracking open old stumps for the fat wood inside, while the careless man is already sitting in front of his easy fire feeling superior, that first man is the one who wakes up in the morning. And here's the cruelty of it. The good wood, the wood that saves you, is the wood that costs you effort to gather. And a cold, tired man does not want to spend effort. Every fiber of him wants to sit down by the easy fire now. So the very thing that would save him is the thing his own exhaustion talks him out of. The good wood gets left standing while the man freezes in front of the bad. The third layer feels like cheating once you learn it, the way the best old tricks always do. It's the reflector, and it's the shelter, and together they change everything. You never, ever build your fire out in the open with your body between the fire and the whole cold night. Because then you're warm on one side and freezing on the other, and you're heating the entire sky for free. Instead, you build a wall behind your fire, logs stacked, or a rock face, or a bank of packed snow. Anything that will take the heat that would have flown off into nothing and throw it back at you. And you put yourself between that reflector and, better still, between two fires, or with your own shelter wall behind your back, so the heat's coming at you from the front and being caught and returned from behind, and you're sitting in a pocket of it. A little lean-to of boughs over your head, a bed of thick evergreen branches under you, so the frozen ground can't suck the warmth straight out of your body, which it will do faster than the air ever could. And now you've built not a fire, but a warm room out of the winter itself. That's the trick. You're not fighting the whole night with one open flame. You're making a small, warm world and living in it. The old hands did this so naturally they'd have looked at you funny for even naming it. A snow trench with a fire at the mouth and boughs underneath. And a man could sleep through weather that would kill 3 men lying in the open by a bonfire. And the fourth layer. This is the one that sounds like pure madness until it clicks. The one every fiber of you will fight. When you are cold, and I mean genuinely cold, and worried, and the night is coming down hard, you do less with the fire, not more. You build it smaller. You sit back from it, not closer to it. You keep yourself just barely warm enough and no warmer on purpose. Because the moment you let yourself get truly warm, roasting warm, comfortable warm, you have opened those doors I told you about, and you're bleeding your deep heat to the sky. And worse, you're getting drowsy. And a drowsy man lets his fire die. The discipline, the thing that separates the men who walk out in spring from the men who don't, is the discipline to stay a little bit cold all night long on purpose. To never once let yourself get so comfortable that you stop tending, stop watching, stop feeding that small, careful fire the good, slow wood, one piece at a time. It sounds insane. Stay cold to stay alive. But it's the truest thing I know about a winter night. The comfortable man is the dying man. The slightly cold, slightly uncomfortable, watchful man is the one who sees the dawn. Now, come back to the riddle, because it's time, and once you see it whole, the rest locks into place forever. A warm man freezes to death. Here is the whole answer laid out plain. The man who lets his big, easy fire make him truly warm has done 3 fatal things at once, and he's done them all while feeling perfectly safe. He's driven his own deep heat out to his skin and given it away to the night, so his reserve is spent. He's grown warm and drowsy and let go of the watchfulness that keeps a fire fed, so he sleeps. And he's built that warmth on fast, wet wood that dies in the small hours. So when the fire goes, there's nothing under it. No coal bed, no banked heat, nothing. And so, in the coldest, blackest, most dangerous stretch of the whole night, a sleeping man with no reserve and a dead fire, and his body's doors thrown wide open to the cold, begins to lose heat faster than he ever could have believed possible. And he does not wake, because losing your deep heat doesn't feel like pain, it feels like warmth. That's the last terrible turn of it. A man dying of the cold, in his final stretch, often feels warm. Warm and peaceful and sleepy. His body's last confused signals tell him he's fine, tell him to rest, tell him to close his eyes. And there are cases, real documented cases, of men found dead of cold who had taken their coats off at the end, who felt so warm in their dying that they undressed in the snow. That's the riddle answered. A warm man freezes to death because the warmth is the very feeling the cold wears when it comes to take you. And the man who chased that warmth all night with his big careless fire has been walking toward it the whole time and calling it safety. I told you this was documented, and it is. Better than almost any old lesson I carry, because this one crossed over into the world of doctors and armies and written record. The condition is called hypothermia, and every military cold weather survival manual ever printed for soldiers warns of it in exactly the terms I've given you. Warns that overheating and sweating in the cold is a killer. Warns against the big fire and for the maintained one. Warns that the felt warmth of the late stages is a fatal deception. The United States Army has trained its mountain troops on this since before your grandfather was born, drilling into them that a soldier who is sweating in the cold is a soldier in danger, because that sweat will freeze and rob him, and that the goal is to stay dry and stay just warm enough and never once let the deep heat drop. And the doctors have a name for that final madness, the undressing. They call it paradoxical undressing, and they've recorded it again and again in the bodies of the lost. Men found stripped in the snow, at peace, killed by a warmth that was never real. That's not a campfire tale. That's in the medical books. It's in the after-action reports. It's in the coroner's findings. The warm man freezes, and the men whose whole job is keeping people alive in the cold have written it down in plain language, because they got tired of burying the ones who didn't believe it. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me, because I'd rather you trust me than be dazzled by me. This is not going to happen to most of you, and I won't pretend it will. You've got a furnace in your house, and a wall thermostat, and a phone in your pocket that'll bring a truck to your door. To actually die of this, you'd have to be out in it, genuinely out in it, stranded or lost, or caught by a storm you didn't plan for. Far enough from help that the night is all yours to survive or not. But I'll tell you the same thing I always do, which is that every man this ever took believed those exact words, right up until the hour it had him. The stranded motorist, the hunter who went a ridge too far, the hiker who figured the weather would hold. None of them woke that morning thinking they'd meet the cold that night. And the difference between the ones who came through and the ones who didn't was almost never toughness and almost never luck. It was knowing. It was understanding, the way you now understand, that the fire is not for warmth, that the big fire is a liar, that the good wood costs effort and the easy wood costs your life, and that the warm, comfortable feeling creeping over you in the small hours is the single most dangerous thing in the whole dark woods. You're probably wondering why nobody ever told you this, why it isn't just common knowledge handed down. And the answer's the same quiet, sad arithmetic it always is. A piece of survival knowing only stays alive as long as people need it. And the day the furnace came, the day a man could turn a dial and make heat appear, the knowing started slipping away. Because nobody pays to remember a rule they'll never have to use. And then it got worse, the way it always does. Because the same instinct that killed those men got sold right back to us, dressed up as comfort. Look at how everything's marketed to you now. Bigger, warmer, cozier, more heat, more comfort. Sink into it. Let it wrap you up. Let yourself go soft and sleepy and warm. Every space heater and every blanket and every cabin fireplace the size of a doorway is selling you the exact instinct that put those men in the ground. The instinct toward the big, roaring, easy warmth, and calling it the good life. There's no money in telling a man to stay a little cold on purpose. There's no product in discipline and watchfulness and a small, mean, careful fire. So the wisdom got crowded out, not by any conspiracy, just by the plain fact that comfort sells and vigilance doesn't. And the thing that keeps you alive out here is the opposite of the thing they can put a price tag on. So here's the whole of it. Small enough to carry and free as the snow that's still coming down outside my little circle of light. Build small, never big. Gather the standing dead wood and the fat pine, and spend the effort it takes to get the good fuel even when your tired body begs you to settle for the easy. Put a wall behind your fire, and a roof over your head, and boughs beneath your body, and make a warm little room instead of heating the whole indifferent sky. And stay just warm enough, watchful and slightly cold, and awake to your fire all night long. And never once trust the comfortable warmth that wants to close your eyes. Do that much, and the country can throw its hardest, coldest night straight at you, and you'll be there to watch the sun come up over the ridge. Maybe that's the real lesson, the one bigger than firewood and bigger than winter. Those men didn't die because the cold was cruel, because the cold was only ever just the cold. They died because comfort felt like safety, and it isn't the same thing. And out here, the gap between the two is exactly as wide as a man's grave. The wilderness never kills the watchful man half as fast as it kills the comfortable one. The old hands feared their own comfort more than they ever feared the cold. And that's the thing I'd hand down to you ahead of any trick I know. Be a little uncomfortable. Stay a little cold. It's the warm ones the winter takes. So tell me, down in the comments, because I want to hear it. When your family got caught out in the cold, in a storm, a stranded car, a night the power died, what's the one thing your parents or grandparents did to keep everyone alive through it that you'd never have thought of yourself? I want to know what they knew. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that runs dead against everything you've been told. An old rule about walking in deep country that sounds backward until it saves you. The kind where the straight line, the shortest, fastest way from where you are to where you want to be, is the surest way to never get there at all. And I'll show you why, along with what the old hands followed instead. Until then, take care of your fire, and remember that the warmth that feels the best is the one you should trust the least.